I will go ahead and introduce the session. For those of you that I've not had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Maria Cardielis. I'm the Executive Director of the IJIS Institute, and I've got a great team here with me today that will present to you the Agile Leadership and Action webinar. It's subtitled Fostering Collaboration and Embracing Change is really not only at the heart of today's discussion, but frankly, what I believe is at the heart of the IJIS Institute and its own collaboration network. From only a housekeeping perspective, before I get into a little bit of content, Gordon mentioned, be on camera if you can, because we're treating this more as an interactive meeting than we are a webinar. The volumes, I think we've got 53 participants now, but we have over 100 that may join us before the end of the session. We want to make sure that even though we are not in a single room face-to-face, we can make this as much of a conversation as possible. Not only because we think that's the most fruitful way to convey some of these messages, but truly that is how this specific topic is best absorbed and understood, discussed and debated. So let me just go ahead into the program and then make some introductions of our team and get into the meat of what is our world. As for those of you that have participated in many of our sessions, one of the things that I typically say on this podium is that if we do nothing other than incite you or inspire you to think outside of our current worlds and our current boxes, I consider that a win. I say that because all of us are so engaged in our day-to-day activities and responsibilities of getting the job done or getting the deliverables completed or issuing whatever memos we need to issue, that we sometimes forget the big picture and fail to address what is the extraordinarily changing environment that we are in. These past few months is only one example that over the 3 to 5 past years, and really a couple of decades before that, that our world has constantly challenged us individually and challenged us from a cultural perspective, challenged us from a justice community perspective, challenged us from a worldwide perspective, that our world keeps changing, the culture keeps changing, the technology innovation we are appreciative of, but even the pace of that is something that we are not accustomed to, at least to continue to adapt to in our practitioner worlds, our justice and our public sector worlds. That change management as a concept is one that we understand and some of us have spent our lives on, but it's one that's very difficult to manage at this time. It's one that it's very hard to convey and to ensure success with. Because of all those changes, the notion of not only the IJIS collaboration network, but collaboration in general in order to achieve what is an agile ability to lead is that much more critical. It's understanding who your peers are, understanding who your partners are, understanding where the gaps are, and understanding that the old rules don't apply. That doesn't mean that some of the old goals and standards and inspirations shouldn't be sought, but that the methodologies to arrive at those ends and to ensure success are very different than they are today. So with that, we encourage not only the change, we encourage the collaboration at the table, we encourage your engagement in this conversation. And we bring to you 2 names that a couple of you have known well over our events in the past. And for those of you, you'll get to know them today and in our future exploration of our leadership portfolio. Brian Riggs is CEO of Riggs Enterprises. For those of you that have been at many of our events, you know that he's not only helping us spearhead the leadership portfolio, but that he runs his own shop to help not only nonprofit organizations evolve through time and be true to their mission, but also help us understand the cultural shifts that are happening in our worlds and how best to ensure success. Gordon Rudeau of Legacy Work is another name that some of you should remember from a couple of our events in the past as well. He is a tried and true partner. He has contributed to many of our events in the past. Brian will tell you a little bit about his background and how it so well fits not only this topic, but some potentials in the future. But I'm appreciative, we are appreciative of his contributions in the past and today. And I would encourage you all to visit his website and we'll provide you that information. And I say that for several reasons, not only for the individual, not only for the company, but this is how leadership, evolution, collaboration, networking is best attained. Having a good resource, having an asset, having skills are those things that we need to share well and openly in order to best address what our needs and our challenges, et cetera. So I'm going to bring my intro to conclusion. I will join the conversation towards the sort of the working session that we will engage you in. And I will encourage you again, please jump into the conversation. Please be part of this dialogue and let us know how we might be able to support your needs in the future. So Brian, I'm going to pass that over to you.
Thanks, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and so many other faces on what looks like a beautiful Wednesday afternoon here in the Philadelphia area. My name is Brian Riggs. I am what I would consider a first cousin to IJIS. I have worked with the team for a little over 8 years in a number of different ways, but most recently in assisting in the design and implementation of the IJIS Institute Leadership Academy, which we're incredibly excited about. And that academy focuses on bridging the gap between public and private leadership opportunities, which is what we'll explore today. A little more on that in just a moment. But before I get to that, I'll talk a little bit more about Gordon Rudo, who will be our lead facilitator today. Gordon is a lifelong friend of mine. We've known each other for more than 40 years, which is almost hard to believe. But professionally, I've worked together for the last 25. He's an incredible individual with a wealth of experience in helping individuals and teams really excel within purposeful, meaningful, and connected work. He started his own company out in San Francisco many years ago, ended up selling that to Lippincott, which was eventually acquired by Oliver Wyman, which is one of the world's largest organizational development companies, where Gordon sat as a partner before recently opening up Agency 150, which is an AI software company aimed at leadership and legacy work, which allows Gordon to continue his work with companies such as Visa, Gap, Roche, and Shell, among others. He's here today to help us think differently about our leadership assumptions, how we benchmark ourselves and our organizations, how we invite a new set of muscle into our leadership regimen. We'll learn about 3 new muscles. And more importantly, which I hope all of you get to enjoy, we're going to embark on a journey of lateral thinking where we look at other organizations and how they've implemented agile leadership over time to affect change in many, many different ways, both in the public and private space. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Gordon and look forward to working with all of you today.
All right, crew. Well, I'm going to get rolling here. It's 1:15. I have an hour and 45 minutes to give you something of value. This particular presentation I built several years ago. It's been iterated a number of times because it's about agility. So why would it stay the same? We're continuing to make it better and more relevant for you all. But before I dive in and yap at you any further, it's been 12 minutes or so of yapping at you already. So I'm going to ask you all a question and ask you to put it into chat, and then we'll talk about it. So the question is this. In terms of lateral thinking, what is a company or an organization that you admire, you aspire to be like, there's something cool about it, you resonate with for one reason or another? When you think about really cool businesses, it's the first one that comes to mind. Put it in chat, and there's 61 people now. So I'd like to count the 61 comments in chat before I start poking back at y'all. So they're starting to come in. We got Verizon, Apple, SpaceX, Axon. I don't know Axon. So I'm going to ask you about
a couple of
Axon.
Axons, Gordon.
Yeah, okay. A lot of SpaceX, Slalom. I know Slalom, a lot of Axon. So, okay. So let's start with that one. And that could be Renee, Rob, well, let's see who we have. Who else has Axon? Kelsey, Renee, or Dylan. Who wants to jump in and tell me about Axon and why you chose it? All
Sorry,
right,
I had to find my mic.
you got it.
Hi,
Go for
my
it.
name's Kelsey. We using it here as Phoenix Police Department. I know every time that I've reached out to Axon, no matter what level we've had to reach out, right? Whether it be communication physically over the phone, or if it's our communication via digital communication. I have never found a chink in their customer service. They are
Yep.
always trying to go above and beyond, and they follow through. It's not, I'm going to pass you off to someone. It's a matter of, let me follow up. Let's make sure. And sometimes you get that one off, right? Everybody's like, oh, this is great customer service from this level of who I spoke with today. But then that second or that third or that fourth time, it was almost like a rare occurrence, right? And me personally, I like to see a company that has set the norm of always doing the extraordinary. That should be the bar. It shouldn't be the randomness of it being, hey, this is great. You had great customer service. It should always be that way. And at every interaction, and I'm telling you, it's quite a bit of interactions that I've had with them. Every interaction is always that follow through. And then that confirmation afterwards. Did we give you everything? Is there any suggestions you can make? All of that. That works for me not only as a supervisor, but I look at it as a consumer as well, right? I don't have to guess who I'm getting on the other end of that and if they're really truly going to help me or if I have to go through another person.
So let's stay with Kelsey for a moment. So Kelsey, is there something in that customer service experience, that responsiveness, that sets a bar for you as a leader in what you expect from your team, or does it influence the way you think about your own operation in any way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We run a call center here where I'm at in my unit, and we're a 24/7 shop. And it's all, I've implemented that follow through. Did I give you everything? It's not that pass off. It's that,
Yeah.
let me see if I can get everything. But it also sets the mindset to my team of educating themselves. It may not be exactly your wheelhouse of what you're doing, right? It may not be your exact responsibility to complete the task, but am I giving them to the right person or getting myself to the right person to make
Yeah.
sure I'm not just passing the buck to the next person? It's, I want to truly get the answer and maybe educate themselves. And like I said, myself, it's what we said in our team, knowing enough, even if it's just a little bit, right? Knowing enough about other working cogs in the entirety of the agency or the company that you're working with, to have
Yeah.
that base foundational knowledge to make sure you're guiding that customer to the right place and getting them every aspect of the help that they're asking for, no matter what it is.
Awesome. Awesome. So in terms of lateral thinking, this is more of a direct correlation. It wasn't a real stretch for you to go lateral on it. It's in your industry. It's a certain quality of service that you can implement directly. Let's go for one that's a little bit more maybe abstract. Either Kyle, William, Ambrose. So Kyle, maybe you can speak up to this one, or Krista on SpaceX. What is it about SpaceX?
Well, for me, with great ambition, right? They have really big ambition to do great things, and they're actually getting it done with a lot of innovation and future thinking. Musk as the leader of that, he's a charismatic guy. He's involved, and so that for me is we all have great ambitions to do great things with our teams or whatever we're doing, but being able to put those into reality is a different situation, right? So. I mean, just we brought the astronauts home just yesterday or the day before. Thanks to that innovation and that ambition. Talking about colonizing Mars. So, I mean, that's huge, big picture stuff. That's for someone like me, that's outside of what I would normally consider an ambitious goal.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. And anyone else on maybe Krista on SpaceX or Princess Renee Waldo?
I would just say how quickly they can turn things around, and the way in which Elon is just, let's just get it done, which is completely different in working, in state government.
Awesome. So these companies inspire us by their audacity, by their drive, by a certain quality of their culture or operations. And sometimes we can take something that's very different, like putting rockets into space, and saying there's a corollary here. There's something that I can learn from this and apply directly. Hexagon is another one I don't know. RR, can you tell us about Hexagon?
Yeah, Hexagon Geospatial is a primarily a CAD vendor, but they make several other types of applications, and we're switching to their CAD service here in Arlington. It's for dispatching public safety agencies.
And is there something about the way that they operate that has been inspiring to you as a leader, or something that you try to incorporate?
I like their level of organization. They were asked to come in here on a rather tight timeline, and they accommodated us, and they seem very organized in their approach.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you have some great cases here. And I just want to, as I begin giving you a background to this model and framework that we're going to dive into, just invite this lateral orientation. What can I possibly learn from very different situations, different leaders, different organizations? And almost the more different, the better, right? I'm gonna give you some that you're gonna be like, well, why is he putting this gym equipment company in front of us? And that's the point. The point is, the more I can get your brains to stretch and find a pattern that's interesting, the more creative the expression will be, and your possibilities of potentially doing different things and executing in different ways. So we love lateral thinking. We're going to invite that throughout the session. The other thing I want to invite is note taking. There's going to be an aspect of this which is informative. I'm going to go through a series of cases, give you certain qualities, and tell you about what we learned from those, and also what was really hard about the work that they're doing that makes this very difficult for you all to implement. So we're going to cover a decent amount of material in about 25 minutes of me yapping. And the other part of it, other than information, is it is a self-assessment. Quite literally a self-assessment. We're going to actually have you take a survey at the end, and the qualities that I'm sharing about these cases and what makes them so hard, specifically, what makes it hard for these companies is probably similar things that makes it hard for you all. And when we talk about these barriers or these points of friction that get created from agility or that challenge agility, I want to understand the degree of impact of those elements in your world. And then we're going to talk about that in small groups. We're going to do breakouts, and then we're going to come back and have a big discussion about how we, across the industries that we represent and the organizations that we're a part of, why we struggle, where the peaks and valleys are on your data, and what you can do differently about it. And we'll spend some time on some recommendations to achieve next levels of agility, innovation, creativity, relevance over time as we get to the end. Does that sound okay? Any
Gordon,
questions? Yes.
I just want to point out two words. One, ambition. Kyle mentioned ambition, and Kelsey referenced co-creation, which I think will come into play a little bit later.
Hold these thoughts. Okay. So I'm going to share my deck, make sure everyone can see this okay. So now I'm not going to be able to see all your faces, but I'll do the best I can to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to go through about 20, 25 minutes of a talk. So having mute on and just taking notes is absolutely fine. If you do have questions or something needs clarification, stop me. While we're in a sort of webinar content, we're in a meeting format, and I want to really use that well. So diving into this, where did this come from? So as Brian said, I had a firm, and it was acquired by one of the top branding firms in the world called Lippincott, which is owned by Oliver Wyman, about a 7,000 person management consultancy, about a $3 billion business. And Oliver Wyman, in owning Lippincott, has a very integrated relationship. The brand firm is doing some very compelling work, and the relationship between that and strategy for them is very tight. A lot of brand firms don't think strategically. A lot of strategy firms don't think creatively. This group had a combination, which is what instigated this body of research. They asked me to study what kept companies or any kind of organization relevant over time. If you look at organizations that have been very hot, but had their hot moment dissipate, that doesn't fit into our study. Organizations that have been around for decades, or leaders that have led organizations through tumultuous times, a variety of external conditions really making their lives either difficult or expansive in different ways. We studied these organizations and looked for the patterns of what makes leaders most effective running agile organizations. So it wasn't necessarily about the infrastructure. It was really about the leadership, which bleeds itself into culture and process and strategy and infrastructures. So you're going to see some of that in these cases. But it was really a question about what are leaders' mindsets and ways of operating that make organizations stable, relevant over periods of time that have a variety of VUCA elements, volatility, uncertainty, and so forth. So if you think about these cases, some are in public sector, many of them are private sector, but they're all meant to stretch your imagination one way or another. So with that, we studied over 100 companies. We came down to 45 top companies, and we looked at their organizations and their leaders, and we found that their qualities of thinking and operating really felt into these three categories, three sort of leadership muscles that we call a creator's mindset. So diving into what do we mean by all of this? Well, starting off with the context point, and you've seen slides like this before, organizations grow in pretty linear ways. They invest in certain things, or they even buy certain things. So it could be through acquisitions, non-organic growth, but it's still structure and pace, because we're humans, operate at a certain level of growth and rate. But organizations, where we go? The other way. Organizations are also dealing with technology and technology and market change, which is exponential. So it's sort of Moore's law times 1.5 these days, or some version of that, right? There's over a dozen exponential technologies that are driving change across industries, and they're all moving at Moore's pace or beyond. So there's a gap between these two that create challenge for leaders. How do I get the humans and organizational structures to move at the pace of the market or technology? And it's never going to keep up. So there's going to be fracturing. So how do you manage the fracturing? How do you keep that pace of agility and move with market, move with technology as assertively as you can to keep up and to stay in front of your customers? So you see that slide and you're like, wow, that's really intense. Well, you've seen some version of this as well. Today, what are we at? March 19. Today will be the slowest pace of change that you'll experience for the rest of your life. And it's crazy right now, but it's only going to get faster. So when you think about this moment right now being as nutty as it is with the pace of change, the pace is increasing, the momentum's increasing, and our challenge as leaders is increasingly hard. So when we think about leadership in the past, making decisions, moving an organization forward, we've had challenges with data, and maybe you do today. Where you get your data, how clean the data is, does your data talk to each other? Do you have systems that are legacy systems and new systems? Are there problems with that? So moving from defined data or limited data to open interdisciplinary data gathering and access is definitely part of this new change that we're seeing. Moving from hierarchy and directive decision-making, we've been seeing that change for quite some time into flat, flexible, and more networked and co-creative organizational models. And even these more software-driven, agile or holacratic models that have come out in small companies or high-tech businesses, they're being expanded into government organizations and non-technology companies for some time. And we're continuing to experiment with models that allow for more agency, more autonomy, more decision-making closer to the customer. We're also moving from an execution or efficiency focus to a value focus, which demands customer centricity, which again relates back to, do we have the data? Do we have flexible capacities to make decisions when we have that customer focus rather than an execution focus? In the past, we've been about getting things right, maybe even perfect, doing waterfall toward sort of planning where it takes a long period of time, but we get it as exact as possible if we start investing and implementing. But now it's much more sharing to improve and not being about perfection, but modest improvement over time. Slow and steady is more about constant evolution. Completing goals is less important than iterating and making new goals that are more relevant for the moment that you're in. This idea of managing and directing is breaking right now. We've come to understand in the corporate world that the role of mid-level management is an untenable job in its current structure, and it's having to be rethought. And AI is coming in to not necessarily save the day, but to add new capabilities if we're open enough to take them on. So we're moving from directing to inspiring and aligning, and going from command and control to being more tuned in and empathetic to our audiences. And again, many executives I talked to today say, I don't even understand this new generation. Like, I can't deal with these millennials. Well, good luck leading them if you're not even interested in understanding them. So really, it's about connecting in and embracing different generations, 5 generations in the workforce today, more than we've ever had. So there's a shift that's happening in leadership. Some would say, and academically we debate this, but many say that this is the largest change of leadership in the history of leadership. Like it hasn't really moved since the Roman times, or you can even go back to the dynasties in China, and you could say, well, leadership has been pretty much consistent. You can read that literature, and many of it is much of it's relevant today. But in the last 5 years, maybe the last several thousand are getting blown away. So that's the context. So we need a different way of operating, and we're studying what does it take to do that. So here's the 3 muscles that we're going to talk about. And this is a good time to take notes if you haven't started yet. So the first one is about open sensing. And that's the first one we'll talk about absorbing and integrating lateral ideas, learning from abstraction and other industries, and being sensitive enough, open enough, caring enough, curious enough to take in new information. When you have that new information, it's about inspiring others to move in a new direction. This is some of the hardest work, is in the second dimension of this, inspiring ambition, getting people to be unanchored from their past. We're pretty calcified in the patterns that we have. Adam Grant wrote a good book about that a couple of years ago called Think Again. But there's a lot of research that shows it's very hard to move organizations from one direction to another, or one cultural pattern to another, even if you have all of these big new ideas of where the company or organization needs to move. And then finally, adaptive co-creation, which is how do you get the infrastructure? How do you actually build adaptivity into the way that you operate as an organization? How do you co-create a new vision together and adapt the systems and processes and methods of work? So each one of these muscles came out of this sort of grassrootsy research, 100 companies, 45 companies, and we're going to outline, I think, about a dozen to 15 of them here. And they all have these 3 muscles. Several of them I put into one category, and they could live in multiple, because these are exceptional organizations for a variety of reasons. So we're going to dive in, unless anyone wants to stop me. Brian, we good?
We're good.
All right, I'm going to keep rolling. Okay. So what does it mean to be open sensing? How do you absorb different influences? Sort of being a sponge, taking in all of these inspirations and information from different areas and being able to actually incorporate that. Who does that really well? So you guys talked about SpaceX. Tesla's been in this case study set for quite some time. Now I happen to own a Tesla. And when I bought one in 2017, I bought the Model X. I didn't see one before on the road. It was brand new. I just bought it. And when I picked it up, I didn't realize that like the doors that move up, like I'm in a skinny garage, and how do they actually move up? Well, they're learning. The sensors on the doors are learning about where my shelves are in my garage. And I learned, all of the sensors are all learning all the time. The brakes are learning all the time. Every vehicle that's on the road is teaching Tesla about how people are driving and using their cars. Now, all of this information might live in databases in another company somewhere out there. When I went to the Tesla tour, a 1 million-square-foot facility in California, all these robots building their cars. In the center of the manufacturing floor is a control room, is a room with all of these computer screens all around it and couches and coffee tables, where all of this information about the millions of cars that are out there are teaching the people who are building the cars how to make them better. There's no distance between customer information, sensor information, and the actual designers and builders of the vehicles. That is happening in an agile way all the time. And they make those improvements and push them on you, whether you like them or not. So the idea of agility, your car is going to do new things. I get in my car and it says, oh, you get an update. Okay, fine. I take on this update and my dash is different than it was the day before, whether I like it or not. But that constant improvement cycle you sort of buy into with Tesla. Extraordinary organization when it comes to absorbing and applying information from multiple perspectives. And that's about as much time as I'm going to spend on any case study. So as you get used to it, we're only going to spend a minute or two on each one, and it's going to go quickly. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts to instigate for discussion later, please take notes. Cirque, another one, very different than Tesla, Canadian organization, pretty amazing about what they do. Now, I was so impressed with them. I had one of their creative directors come speak to us at an organization. So I got a very intimate view into sort of their 9 key behaviors and values and how they run their organization. And one of them really stood out to me. I think it was like value number 4, which they call treasure hunting and creative transformation. So how do they stay relevant? How do they stay tuned in? Where they're always hunting for the next act. They have recruiters. They have people out there going to parks all over the world, finding a juggler outside of City Hall in a park outside of Alberta. And this particular juggler that's doing an interesting thing, they're like, he doesn't have a full act yet, but there's something amazing that he can do. And we're going to bring him in to the fold and make him into a treasure. So the treasure hunting, they find gems and they polish them up and they put them into an act with other people and they make them into something that they weren't before. So everyone transforms. Everyone gets better all the time because they're always plucking new people and this fresh thinking and these new acts and possibilities all the time. The other thing about Cirque that you probably noticed is that they're everywhere now. First, they reinvented the circus. Like the circus used to be like elephants and peanuts. Now it's really about storytelling and music, and it's theatrical. So they reinvented it. They thought differently. They took information from other domains, including Broadway. They bring in acts from other places. So they're always getting influenced by local areas and new people. And they're also amazing at setting up partnerships. They're on cruise lines. They're having hotel relationships. They have partnerships with big music labels where they're producing music that's actually relevant in the market. So they're bringing people into the fold through every available mechanism. Incredible organization to study. Next one we're going to look at, which is a little bit more in your domain. We looked at some public sector ones as well. Now, if you haven't seen this particular prison system in relationship to others around the world, it's unbelievable. Now, I'm not familiar with your industry as much as I am into tech and the other cases here. And Brian, you can speak up to this case as well. But this is one that learned from psychology, learned about mentoring, learned about graphic and even interior design. They are bringing in all kinds of influences to build an environment that's beautiful. There's 3 prisons in Norway that are part of this system that all are at record rates of recidivism. It has like 20% compared to the 50 to 70% that is the global standard. Their prisoners and their officers, they're not called guards, they're officers, go on runs together, they exercise together, they cook together. Yes, we have inmates that are murderers that are holding 9-inch butcher knives every day with other people present, and they are safe. There's very little safety issues there, very little noise violations. They are not loud. They are not obnoxious. There is a level of partnership and teamwork that happens because we've learned from these other influences about how to actually treat human beings and get them out into the community. They actually make their plans for their release on the day that they arrive. So all kinds of practices that allow them to visualize their future and create a future that's greater than the one that they entered in. So this is an interesting first pass. So I'm going to go through 3 versions of this slide. So in the self-reflection part of this presentation, it begins now. So open sensing's hard because why? Well, we like data that makes us look good. So if you see any of these points that I'm about to make, I'm going to make 5 points that are like, ooh, we do that. Ooh, that kind of feels like us. Ooh, my colleague, man, that's an anchor point for him or her. That slows us down. Then take a note of that. Because if you want to be a good open sensor, these are the things that create friction. Only looking for data that makes you look good. Or because you like executing rather than integrating new thinking. You just, you're all about execution, your organization, it gets stuff done. Some of you talked about that with Elon Musk. You just get stuff done, and that's great. But does it hold you back from integrating new thinking? Does the execution focus actually become a crutch or an inhibitor of taking on new ideas and learning? Do you notice this in your organization? Open sensing is hard because many organizations and leaders just lack the energy to stay open. It's like, yes, I heard your ideas. We're done with new ideas. We're just moving forward now. Or they don't invite people to challenge them. Some leaders just really like being right. Like yes people around them, don't really like the idea of people beneath them giving different opinions. So that happens. And then finally, you might notice this in your organization. That's just hard to be an open sensor because you can't access the data that you need. So it's not necessarily just looking for the data that makes you look good. You just can't get the data that allows you to look outside or get broad influences. So that's open sensing. Muscle number 2 coming up. Okay. So what's inspiring ambition all about? It's about creating a movement, energizing people with vision, with strategy, with calls to action. Okay. So what is creating a movement all about? Who does that really well? Well, Peloton's created a movement. I mean, the pandemic helped them. Everyone had to stay home and they had record sales. But now they're selling treadmills and rowers. They're doing something right. And they have a platform that it gets people very, very engaged. So yes, they're exceptional because of getting influences from the outside as well as open sensing, because they have trainers out in the field talking to people. That's really, really good as well. But they got high energy people who are great on screen. How do they inspire people? Because they're motivating people. Their face to the organization are people like her that you just look at and you're like, oh, I gotta get energized. I want to be like them. So the energy that they create is infectious. They also have a platform that really learned from psychology. I remember when I first had my Peloton and I started racing for the first time with other people and seeing that this leaderboard is actually making me work harder. I'll be fully disclosing here. There was a girl that was called like Cute Muffin or something like that. And Cute Muffin was crushing me on, a ride. And I just wasn't going to let Cute Muffin get ahead of me. So I worked my butt off to get ahead of Cute Muffin. And I'm like, they really know what they're doing here. Like they're getting me to be a better rider, to beat Cute Muffin, to beat my own races, to be a part of this energizing platform. So Peloton's a great case for inspiring ambition. Now you look at GM and like, really, are they a great case? Well, they had a really hard time. They were close to bankrupt, and they did need money from the government, but they came out of that incredibly strong. They have an innovation lineup. They changed their way of operating. They have built new applications and technologies on their infrastructure. Entire technologies on just streamlining their infrastructure. They had a vision of where they're going to go in electrification. They pushed the market on that. And now they have own fleets going electric. Brian, you got off mute, so you have something to say on this one?
Oh, there's an amazing article on GM in the Wall Street Journal, and you can just Google General Motors Agile Leadership. Their CMO talks like really succinctly about how it came about, how they implemented, and what it looks like today. So just an extra resource for everyone.
Yeah, there's a quote from Mary, the CEO, and I'm picking up my phone to read this one. I didn't memorize it, but forgive me. I don't believe in fixed organizational structures because things shift over time, and being fluid and agile is how you create is very important. So the creative process, which you'd say General Motors is a creative business. They're building and designing and creating, is fueled by agility. E-Estonia, public case. We thought this would be an interesting one for you all. It didn't come up in our original research, but in doing additional research in the public market for you all, what an incredible case study. So visionary leadership. 2002, they decided they are going to be a leader in technology. They are going to be a country that gets ahead of big Western countries in being the greatest infrastructure for a digital organization and country. And they did it. They are number one on many, many fronts right now. They have more unicorns per square mile than any company, unicorns being, extraordinary companies with exponential growth. They have done everything. You want to file your taxes, you want to get a fishing license, you want to get a marriage license, you want to vote, everything is simple and easy. And they really got the customer side of things. So it was easy to inspire towards a vision, but they were relentless. Another key story about E-Estonia is no matter what they went through, they focused on that vision and they didn't give up anything. They brought more and more people along, academic institutions, small businesses. They basically became an incubator for new companies, new ideas, new platforms. They have a hydrogen, they got into hydrogen cars and decided to create the most advanced fleet of hydrogen cars. So, I mean, they're involved in everything, but it was really a mindset. And that's what we wanted to share about this E-Estonia case. It wasn't just their partnerships and their structures, and they've inspired everybody to join along. I mean, other countries are trying to follow in suit. Even certain states in the US are taking the E-Estonia playbook. But they just stayed focused no matter what was going on in the industries. And if you watch their videos and hear their stories, just wonderful people who are dedicated to an inspiring future. But this can be hard too. And why is inspiring ambition really hard? Well, first of all, I mean, it's a struggle to go against the grain, to do anything new. I'm sure GM had a very, very hard time pushing their board and their investors to do some of the more innovative moves that they had, but you have to fight for it. If you're going to go against the grain, you have to have conviction, you have to have visionary leadership, and you got to be willing to take the slings and arrows. It's also hard to inspiring ambition because where you're heading depends on you understanding where you are. And many leaders don't have a clear picture of where they are. They don't even want to know the current state. And I've seen this firsthand many, many times. Executives wanting to create a powerful vision, but not talk about the gap between the vision and the current state. Now, we know as consultants that it's like a rubber band. When you put a rubber band on that future state and you pull it back, the further you pull it back, the more crisp that picture is of that current state, the more creative propulsion you have that moves people towards it. So having a really clear understanding of where you are and being, again, empathetic and tuned into your environment is critical. Many of these cases are about focusing on the long term of the short term. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Being really clear about your desired outcomes. And it's not just about clarity for you, it's clarity for your fellow leaders. Everyone to be clear about the desired outcome, everyone to be bought in and aligned on those desired outcomes. You see that consistently across these cases. And sometimes it's just hard to tell a good story. Many organizations do exceptional work, but they don't feel like they're chest thumping or that they have the capacity to tell good stories, or they think that their humility is in service of them, but it's often not. Having really compelling stories, and if you go to E-Estonia, just their website, it's inspiring just to see what they're telling of their own story. So finally, the last muscle. How do you do adaptive co-creation? Who does this really well? How do you bring things to life? How do you learn from mistakes, adapt your organization, and get to outcomes together? So who does this really well? Zara is one of my favorite case studies. I don't buy their clothes personally, but I think as a case study, it's pretty incredible what they do. I worked for Banana Republic for many years. They were my client. It took them 48 weeks to produce a piece of clothing. So they design something in the spring and it'll come out the following winter or early spring. So from the early stage, I'm looking at inspiration, I'm building mood boards, I'm starting to design a line to store. They moved that 48 weeks under my watch when I was supporting them to 34, and they thought that was pretty exceptional. Zara does it in 6. Now, everyone else in the industry is like 24 to 48. How does Zara do it in 6 weeks? Well, they do just-in-time manufacturing. They don't overbuild their lines. And here's my favorite part of their story. They're putting out a new red dress. And they don't know whether to design that dress A, B, or C. They have a zipper that goes on the side, they got a zipper in the back, and they have a tie. They have 3 different ways of doing the dress. They send those 3 different dresses to stores across the world. And they ask the managers to talk to all their customers who are trying on a dress. What do you like about that dress? Do you like the bow? Would you like it better if it had a zipper over here? Would you like it to have a zipper over here? They gather that data and they have real-time feedback and they design the clothing the way the customers want it. That kind of turnaround is not seen anywhere in the industry. They produce new lines every 2 weeks. It's an incredible case study in terms of fast fashion. They put their manufacturing facility right next to headquarters. They talk to their managers all the time. They move incredibly quickly, and all of their systems are meant to be adaptive. Netflix is also one that is very adaptive. When you see, wait, the show that I like, it just went off, and this new show just came in. What's happening here? They move so quickly, it's dizzying sometimes. It's frustrating sometimes, but they're always trying to be as relevant as they can, bringing in a ton of international product, national product. They're getting into sports. They're trying to diversify every way that they can. But they have a system that allows for that. They tune into their customers. They allow for a lot of feedback to come in, and their leadership is all about innovation. So when you think about innovation in a platform, they're constantly adding to their platform. They have adaptive implementation to their technology, and that was how they started because they are a platform, but they brought that adaptivity into the way that they hire employees, the way that they manage and lead, and everything is focused around the customer. So it's easy to bring people along and to adapt into an organization when you're as customer focused as they are, because everything is demanded on how the customer operates. Now, Boeing is a different story. I wrote this case study before the Max and the big debacles, but I kept it in there because the way that they recovered from that was pretty outstanding as well. They brought in Dave Calhoun, new CEO. He said, okay, I'm not going to take a salary until I perform. So he was seen as somebody that was going to focus on the long term and allow himself to have the dedication to that in terms of putting skin in the game. And everything that they've done has allowed for adaptivity, a lot of feedback, partnerships with the FAA, more teaming, more feedback and iteration on their technologies. So we think they're still deserving of a space of adaptivity. And finally, Brian's going to talk to you about Navajo Nation. That's a case that he's familiar with.
Yeah, we'll give Gordon's voice just a break for 60 seconds. Last year, and really over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to work with an organization that is directly connected to federally impacted schools. Those are schools on military lands and Indian reservations. And I came across a superintendent by the name of Quincy Nate. I'm not sure if anyone online has heard of him. His school district is the Chinle School District on the Navajo Nation. And in 2014, Superintendent Nate inherited a really challenging situation that I'm sure no one has ever come across. He inherited a toxic culture, a poor performing team, and really terrible outcomes in his students, almost to the extent that the federal government was getting involved. And so when I came across the story of Chinle in 2014, as I said, they were in a really bad situation, and Superintendent Nate decided it's time for us to collaborate, to be adaptive. And before we can do any of that, we've really got to take an assessment of ourselves. And so he embarked on an appreciative inquiry planning strategy where he embarked on a current state and a future state initiative. The current state involved self-assessments by his leadership team, his teachers, his board of directors, everyone involved in the education ecosystem. And what they found was not so great energy. There was zero inspired ambition. And so Superintendent Nate designed a future state by bringing in non-traditional entities to help design what would become a plan that in 2025 led to the Chinle Elementary School being one of 5 blue ribbon schools in the entire state of Arizona. Unprecedented for a school on native land, almost unprecedented for traditional public schools. And what he did was really remarkable. He looked at what an educational ecosystem looked like, and in addition to improving what the kids were experiencing within the halls of the school, he looked at what was not being done at home, what was not being done in the community, and reached out to non-traditional community partners to help provide electricity via a single solar panel. A lot of the residents on this reservation, they don't have running water, they don't have electricity. And so he found companies that shared his values and brought them in as educational partners. And so this particular power company put single panel solar panels on the roofs of these homes, and it wasn't enough to fuel the entire home from an electricity standpoint, but it gave each student a small lantern to learn outside of school hours. And that minor incremental change didn't cost the partner a whole lot, but changed the direction for kids who had to go home. Some of these kids were being bused 3 hours each way to and from school. And so the downtime for them was critical. He partnered with a statewide school bank to address food insecurities. And then most importantly, he went to the elders and in his future state, he didn't want the students to lose a sense of their culture, of their legacy. And so he asked the traditional elders what it looked like for them to design future plans for the nation. And all of that ended up in this remarkable strategic plan that is made public. I can circulate the link. But most importantly, the lesson that I learned, I was on the reservation last month, was that agile leadership isn't a single event, and it requires our ability to sustain that approach over time. I mean, 10 years it took Nate to get his schools from where they were, incredibly dismal situation, to where they are, top 5 in the entire state of Arizona. There's also a documentary on Netflix called Basketball or Nothing, which highlights the rise of their basketball team as a focal point for bringing their community together. They ended up being state champions. It's incredible. But from an adaptive standpoint, it's all about being really honest with yourself and your team, looking at your current state through assessment, designing a future state that looks much different than it would, and collaborating with traditional and non-traditional partners. So hats off to the school district. It's an amazing opportunity, and I have the pleasure to continue to work with them.
Thank you, Brian. And as you hear these cases, being adaptive and co-creative, it's hard. It's hard for a bunch of reasons, and we're articulating the first one is it's just hard to trust and delegate. Like it requires a variety of delegations and handoffs and allowing for autonomy and agency with your people to have that kind of adaptivity. And again, perfection. It's hard to delegate and it's hard to get things moving if you want everything to be right and perfect. Sometimes it's hard because it's difficult to even get the pathways for collaboration. A lot of what I've expressed in those cases, and Boeing was a great example of that. It was cross-functional teaming, Netflix as well, that they sort of describe as the key aspect of their creative process. It's really about how functions are working together in different ways than they did in the past. And sometimes it's hard in public institutions, and maybe your organizations have some silos that are pretty well structured, but this is a big problem or challenge that needs to get overcome. It's also hard to be adaptive because everyone just wants to get shit done and move on. And to shift that mentality from just getting it done to adapting and becoming more relevant or future oriented It takes a certain kind of leadership. And finally, it's hard to be adaptive when you want to be the hero. And I'm not suggesting that you all on this call, but maybe your colleagues or maybe your boss or someone. Sometimes a leader tries to move an organization by brute force or hero worship rather than really giving it up to everybody else. And the more that you celebrate others' success and the more agency and freedom that people have, the more likely in that networked and less hierarchical model that an organization can move with the market. So these are all of these challenges and cases. We're going to do a little bit of a self-assessment in a moment, but the question is, like, what does it mean to you? How do you unlock your success? How do you make some of these changes in your own blueprint? How do you scenario plan and stay agile? And it's embracing reality. So let's talk about these 15 qualities in just a moment. I'm going to stop share. And before Alex, I give it to you, just 5 minutes. And then we're going to do a self-assessment, but just 5 minutes. Excuse me. What cases stood out to you? What, before we talk about ourselves, what was surprising? What was interesting? Let's just get 5 minutes of discussion on what you think this group can learn from some of these very different kind of organizations. Gregory.
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting that I didn't know about was the Tesla. The comments you made about Tesla, because it makes complete sense. It's something that I've been trying to do with a number of firms I've been with when I've been in a leadership role, is get people out of the being in the middle, because it's like the telephone game. Things get lost in translation consistently. And I remember the biggest challenge I've always had is upper management saying, well, that's not the way we do it. And then you describe the outcomes and the benefits, and well, no, I don't want those people talking to those people, because then these people get ideas and now cost us more. And just kind of go through the whole process was always so cumbersome because of the lack of effort I think people wanted to put into it. But that was very telling.
Excellent
Excellent
point, Gregory. Yeah, one anecdote. At Oliver Wyman, on a big $20 million project, we'd have 2 partners, a principal or 2, a couple associates, some consultants, maybe 5 or 6 consultants and an associate. So you have about a dozen people, almost the same number of sensors as a car has, right? So I'd say to the partners, I'm like, you got a dozen sensors in these humans in your organization, but you think that you should be running everything. Like, they're in meetings and they don't speak. Why are they not speaking? Why do you not give them a voice? They're in with the troops doing the real work, and you're not giving them a voice. So exactly your point, Gregory. Like, how do we smooth out those channels and have a direct communication from whatever you consider a sensor? I use Tesla's car as an example. I use my junior consultants as another example, whatever it is in your world. But you've got these points of information coming in, and they're typically blocked by governance, by people, by hierarchy, by bureaucracy, by a culture of not speaking up. Thank you, Gregory. What are other cases that people have found compelling? Go for it, Robert.
The GM case where they were on the brink and had to basically shift left and rebuild. And I think as much as getting collaboration and creativeness is also, first off, looking inside yourself to see what works with you, because everybody's human and everybody isn't getting sender receiver or how they want to be led themselves. So it's a little bit of introspection and a little bit of extrospection, and asking and being honest with whoever you lead. Hey, what comes off as, different, or what is best way to communicate to you or lead you, and just like learning something, you could learn via listening, writing, reading it, what have you. And it's just all about, understanding that they're not a number on a piece of paper or just in a chain. They're an actual quantity in a human being. And we've all had the boss that we can think of in 3 seconds. It's really awesome and really, really crappy. But, there's obviously the happy medium to everything. But it's also about, just understanding the human element in everything.
Excellent. Excellent points. And GM is not a company that you often think about as agile. And it was one of the most bureaucratic organizations when my colleagues were there 20 years ago. And it's a very, very different place today. One or two more comments.
Gord, I'll weigh in if
And then Renee. Renee was about to jump in.
no,
but
go
you-
ahead. We'll kick it to Renee.
Renee first.
Well, I thought the Navajo Nation was really an interesting example, and one of the reasons is it pointed out so many of these large kind of intractable problems, poverty and all of that, but it zeroed in on very small pieces of that where the solution was relatively easy and the payoff was large. So
Excellent. Jose, jump in and then we'll go to Brian.
I was actually, going to pick off on the Navajo story as well. One of the things that, I've been with so many departments over the years, and it's coming into a team that it's in a way dysfunctional in essence, not only in communication, the lack of communication between management and those under them, but also kind of like the work they're performing. Like sometimes I feel like I come into a place and kind of question, how did you get this job? Like, it's as rude as that sounds, it's one of those things where you come into a work environment, everybody has certain responsibilities, and then you're wondering why those responsibilities are not being handled, why there's a lack of communication, where are the missing pieces, and kind of like that story is, I've been in functional environments, so I kind of know how things are supposed to work, and then you will come into an environment that's the exact opposite, and then that's where questions like those kind of just start populating in your head.
Yeah, Jose, it's a great observation, and we didn't have time to really get into any of these case studies in great detail. But what happened during the current state was this assessment, and then on the backside of the assessment was the design of shared vision, values, and purpose. So that's really, you look at the team. Here's what's challenging. Here's where we want to go. Who's on board? And then how do we design the vision? So great point. Yeah, Gordon, I just wanted to say that all of these case studies are really great examples of agile leadership, but there's this trend among a few of them that I want to challenge everyone to think about, more specifically Netflix and Peloton, and in a way, Norway. They all transcend our common notions of space and time and place. And it's really important for us as best as we can. If you take a leadership course, they say, step outside of yourself, get outside of your comfort zone. It's the only way you truly know who you are. The same holds true for our longstanding beliefs of where things should be. And Norway built smaller facilities close to towns where the prisoners were so they could interact with their families. Netflix created this opportunity not only to build community around shows, how many people ask who's watching what, but you could watch it on your own time. So it displaced our traditional sense of when and where. And Peloton did the same thing. So as we challenge ourselves to think about what is agile leadership is not being afraid, to the CEO of Netflix's point, not being afraid to look at those other spaces and even embarking on a journey that disrupts them. So it's really all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and just to double down on that one, I think for most of these, the leaders at some point have heard, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
Right? Almost every one of these case studies, as I hear you talk about, Brian, like you have to deal with that sort of defensiveness and resistance and attack, because most of these are long-term visionary efforts, and you had to sort of really go after something that's big and bold, and you're going to battle your board, you're going to battle your colleagues, you're going to have to go through battles. So agility is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's also a muscle in itself. Like these are three elements of muscle, but it's sort of your fitness as a leader that allows you to use all of these muscles over time effectively. So any other comments from the group before We
I
pivot
was
a bit?
gonna
Go
say,
ahead,
if you
Rachel.
think about the opposite and those companies that kind of weren't agile and they are no longer around, that, you know, the Blockbusters, the BlackBerry, Polaroid, things where you can find examples where they just they were set in their ways and they weren't agile, and they, you know, so the exact opposite of the examples that you had.
There's a lot of fear in not jumping into the risk, right?
With that, perfect segue. Your own inner work. So I'll take your segue, Rochelle, about the inner work aspect of this challenge for all of us as leaders. There's always an inner work piece of it, our own resistance inside of us and from our colleagues, you know, managing their inner landscape of resistance. So with that, Alex, if you wouldn't mind putting this survey up on screen, I'm going to walk you through these questions. So the link is there, and we're going to ask you to click on the link in a moment and do the survey. But if you wouldn't mind sharing screen, and I'll just walk through the survey questions, and if you wouldn't mind scroll down. So basically, the 5 qualities that I said make this muscle hard for each of the 3 are the 15 questions that we're asking you to self-assess. They're just written a little bit differently. So we want data to make us look good. Now, if that's not true at all in your organization, like there's no leaders that really focus on making sure that the data makes them look good. They want all sorts of interesting data. They want data that challenges them. Then make this very low. Call it a 0 or 1. But if this is actually something that you see regularly, and you know it's a problem, then it could be a 3, it could be a 4, it could be a 5. If you know that this is an Achilles heel topic for your organization to be agile, give it a 5. Show us where these are challenging points for you. So going down, you want data that makes you look good, you execute rather than staying open, or rather than integrating new thinking, lack the energy to stay open. Hopefully these all make sense and relate back to the stories I told. So with that, why don't we give everybody 5 minutes? This shouldn't even take 5. You should go with your gut instinct responses, 15 quick responses. And when everyone's done, and Alex lets us know that we've gotten 52 responses, then we're going to put you in breakout. And in breakout, you're going to discuss 3 things. 1, what was interesting about this data set broadly? When you look at the collective data, what's interesting about that? And then your own data, like you scored yourself a 2 on this and a 1 on that. Like talk about that with your peers. Are you a 1 or a 2? Like, oh, you're a 5 on that one. Wow, you're a 5. What can I help you if I'm a 1 on this? So do some shared discussion about where your strengths and weaknesses are in your breakout, what you notice that's interesting, and what are some things that you might do if there was an action you might take, or one thing that occurs to you as an experiment or a step forward or something that you're willing to take on as inner work or actual real work. What would they be? And just have a discussion about those 3 things in breakout. We'll bring them back in 15 minutes. Let's not make it 20, Alex. Let's take it down to 15. We ran a little bit long, but it's 1:15 now. We're going to bring you back at the bottom of the hour from breakout, and then we're going to have a group discussion. The question, as I teed up, is really about your leadership team of your organizations. Like, how are they leading your agencies or your institutions? And if you don't reflect on these behaviors or mindsets being your own, but maybe the people sitting around the table with you, then it's probably pervasive, you know, throughout. So that was really the question. And whether or not you scored high or low isn't really the point. The point is for you to reflect on what stood out for you in that reflection and what can you learn from that. So let's spend a few more minutes on that. Joseph, you're off mute, so I'm going to pick on you. Joseph.
Okay, and you can call me Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Our group had 3 things that we kind of examined, and the way the hero complex can get in the way of us, where you know, we're in an industry where it, you know, there are a fair number of heroes here trying to make things safer, more just, those types of things, and may stifle innovation. We had some discussion about perfect being the enemy of good enough, and how do you move forward with a less than perfect solution when we are scrutinized in government to be 100 over 100, right? So came forward with some discussions about making an environment safe to fail in minor ways, but make things better overall, make it better than the status quo with each iteration, those types of things. And then learning, learning not only from mentors and from leaders and all that, but learning from the entire organization, learning both up and down. And my cohorts can check me if I misspoke at all.
So I appreciate those comments, Joe. And the very last point is one that I could have put as an umbrella to the entire presentation. It's about agility and leadership, but it really is about organizational learning. Like, I think that's the other heading that really works here. If you want to study more, Learn or Die is a great book. The Fifth Discipline, obviously a great book. And Everyone Culture and Immunity to Change, great literature on learning organizations. And having this sort of fluidity in learning is probably the most foundational aspect of agility. So thank you for bringing it up, Joe. I think that's right on point. Couple more comments?
Actually, that needs to go to Kelsey. That was her.
Kelsey. All right.
Yeah, I think it was.
Look at Joe following through on Jose, saying it was us. It's a win for all of us, but it's also the win for the one who it came from. Good looking out, Joe.
That's what we're
Sounds like
talking about, delegating and giving others credit. Greg, weigh in.
The fluidity, when you said fluidity of learning, that really struck me. Could we dig into that a little bit more, maybe? I mean, there's an attitude or a perception at it, or a way to accept it, be open to it, right?
Yeah.
There's always cases where people say lifelong learning, but fluidity of learning is really different than that, right?
Yeah.
Or is it the same?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. And this one, Brian worked with me on many years ago, one of our favorite cases. The US sailing team. So when BMW Oracle started an America's Cup team in 2007, I was brought in to build the vision for how that organization would operate. And I don't know if you know much about sailing, but I'm not a sailor, but the organizations get ramped up very, very quickly. They go from 0 to about 250 people immediately. They have, several $1 million. They build an organization. You've got a design, you've got training, you've got manufacturing, you've got, the sailing team, etc. Transpo and logistics, it's massive. And they move through that stuff. And when Larry Ellison hired me for this gig, and Larry's in the room, and you got the top sailors in the room, Russell Coots, Jimmy Spithill, like these are the guys that are best in the world. And it was fascinating. So here's my anecdote real quickly on it, is that the other teams have been around a lot longer. The New Zealand team, the Australian team, they were been racing together as a tight group for many, many years. So this group, while it was world-class that Larry put together, it was their first time ever in a room together. So how are they possibly going to beat anyone else? They don't have that fluidity that we talked about, right? It's not secondhand conversation at all. They're just getting to know each other. So when we built a vision, it was really cool. The vision statement was, we will win the cup by our joy of sailing and learning faster than any other team. Their joy of sailing and learning faster than any other team. And that was my job. I was with them for their whole campaign. I was with them for a second campaign. And in that first campaign, it was really about making sure that when they were on the water and they were testing a new tool that they just made, if that tool was a millimeter off, the speed of that information getting to the design team, getting to manufacturing, getting back to the boat team, and then training on how to do it, like that cycle needs to be super fast. Like everything that has happened, these organizations are splintered. They're athletes, not business people. They don't know how to run a business or run an org, but we taught them how to run an org, and the fluidity of information flow. When someone learned something, everyone needed to learn it. 200 people needed the information that we just got just now. So when we talk about fluidity of learning, this idea of moving fast on the water faster than anyone else because you're learning better than anyone else, faster than anyone else. That's the image that I've been holding for, 17 years now.
I think it helps that they might have all come from the same base of understanding regarding the industry, right? So if you have disparate teams coming from engineering or sales or marketing or ops, it's very different than maybe all being sailors, all used to, I'm making things up, bigger boats, used to, extreme competition at the highest level sort of thing. So there's already a mindset towards something.
But you've got engineers, you've got lawyers, you've got coaches and trainers, you got business people and marketers. It's a very diverse organization, like you can imagine. But what else stood out for you? So fluidity of learning, and sort of the humanity of that we wanted to speak to, of really knowing everybody and spending the time investing in that so that you can delegate effectively. What else stood out for you in your conversations? Go ahead, Renee.
We talked a lot about the importance of hiring employees that understand the mission and the goals of the organization. So then if you can relate how innovation is going to support those, they're more likely to get on board. And then also the importance of listening, and being open to ideas from employees.
Wonderful points, Renee. If you think about a lack of alignment, we're not all on the same page. That is tremendous resistance, right? If you get everyone aligned to a vision and we're all guided towards that mission and purpose, we all see that same place that we're going to, we might need to get other things out of the way. We might see things that other people didn't see, but we're all heading in the right direction.
And that really comes from Princess. So a lot of very direct experience from her.
Excellent. Other points that came out of your conversation. We're going to look at the data in just a minute. All right, Alex, why don't we spool up the data and then talk some more? So we're going to show you the macro data. So if you have either in notes or just in your memory, how you scored against these numbers, wanting data that makes us look good. And the way that we look at this as just a quick glance is sort of like a net promoter score. Things that are 4s and 5s, we spend a lot of time on. So this one's got a 48% on 4s and 5s. You guys want data that makes you look good. That is a significant portion of this audience that is wrestling with colleagues or themselves that is less likely to be challenged and looking more for data that makes them look good. Keep going. 3s, 4s, and 5s. Wow, this is really big. Executing versus integrating new thinking. And you'll see some points at the end that illustrates the degree of executional focus of your orgs is significant. There's only a few patterns that came out of this small data set, but this is one of them. Lacking the energy to stay open, less of your issue. So you say. This one a bit more. Again, similar to making you look good with data, not inviting challenge, pretty consistently high. Not having the data, less of an issue. It's sort of a median score. That's good. Struggle going against the grain, pretty high, 45% on the top 2 boxes. A lot more when it comes to the 3s. I would imagine that there's a way of doing things in many of your organizations that is pretty well situated. Not a significant issue. I think you are probably pretty embedded in your current state. I was surprised, frankly, by this one about the lack of issue with long-term focus. I would think that many orgs are more executional, as you said earlier, and that translates to more short-term orientation. Maybe not so much in this pass. Can't get clear about desired outcomes. So getting the alignment that Renee was talking about. Again, not as big of an issue as we thought it would be. Telling a good story, a lot of public organizations really struggle with. It doesn't seem to be as big for you all in terms of what the hot issues were. Hard to trust and delegate, pretty high scores on delegation. Again, executional focus, getting shit done, making sure that everyone's growing and developing and getting opportunities, less of a focus. Perfectionism, less of a focus. Less of an issue on collaboration. That's good to see. This was the big one on eager to get it done and move on, which a couple other scores correlate to that earlier on, and loving to be a hero. Here you go. Not your biggest challenge, but a decent amount of challenge. So with about 10 minutes left before we start wrapping up, as you think about your own scores, your own reflections against the aggregate, where do you do really well versus the aggregate, or where do you see yourselves suffering in a particular area, unreasonably so against the aggregate? Anyone?
Gordon, one thing I guess I'll add, since in this conversation, is that we kind of talked a little bit in our breakout group. I would love to see how this survey correlates between those who are private sector versus public sector, and how the leadership agenda changes on that, not only across the difference from private to public. The obvious one, hey, private side revenue and profits drive a lot of what we do with it versus public, but also how does it change between the top of the organization down to the individual teams and how they lead their particular groups? Because I think that changes some too. But that's it. It'd be interesting to see if the leadership strategy changes any between the two of them. It would just be curious. We talked about that a good bit in our breakout group.
And then
Yeah,
I'm
we're
gonna jump
curious.
into it, Gordon, before you answer, I'm gonna just jump in and remind you of the conversation we were having in our own room. That explains the gap between some of these questions and how we thought there would have been trends from one side to the other. Casey, from your perspective, if you look, and I don't know that we actually gave out the participant list or not, but I did go back and look at the dynamic of the room itself. Those that are on the operational side, they're doing something. On the one hand, they're doing something as part of that larger team. So it could have been that swimming team. Are they the ones that are looking and testing the new mechanism? Or are they the ones that's tossing it over the wall and saying it needs to be refined? They're the ones that are so precise in their mission that they know that their cohorts are going to help them succeed. That's the operational mission in many organizations, because they do have either a clean top down, or they've been there long enough and they understand whether they're call taking, whether they're dispatching, whether they're into crime analytics, whatever it is within their control of a smaller group. If you are on a nonprofit side or even a profit side, the profit side from Casey's point is, where's the money? How am I going to survive? How am I going to function? So it's that short term, and only hopefully the visionaries will say, in order to continue to support the mission, we should evolve a little bit to the east or a little bit to the west. And the nonprofits are trying to assess the changing environment. What do they need? What can we successfully provide them? How do we tell our story? How do we succeed? So I think the audience who's answering the question changes the response. But now I'll shut up and toss it over to you, Gordon.
No, I think that sounds great. There was a discussion that we had in our breakout that we would give you the survey and maybe give you the deck and see if you wanted to run this with your orgs to go a couple levels deep, and then we could do a compare contrast of the collective data in a few months. Brian, did you want to speak to that, or Maria?
I'll let Brian go and then tag on him.
Yeah, sure. And Casey, you sort of alluding to this, but we were talking about this being a benefit to participants and allowing you to not only have the deck, but the opportunity to survey your teams, both vertically and horizontally, if you wanted, however you wanted to do it, without indicating company name. We'd collect the data from a public and a private side, redistribute the findings so that at a minimum, the IJIS community and members thereof can see the difference in agile leadership and perhaps begin to work internally on connecting those, but also externally on sharing the information with your teams to get closer to sort of empathy and empathetic leadership when it comes to working with each other.
The only things I'd add to that is more long-term concepts for your consideration. As part of this larger leadership portfolio within the organization, we want to better understand and best understand what your needs are. So this suggestion now to provide you the survey so you could go a little bit deeper than today's exercise, and then us being able to compare and contrast this to ensure that then we are able to provide you ongoing services if you're interested, whether you're public or private, whether it's in a unit or it's the total organization, so that over time, in the example of the 3 muscles, you can better understand which of those you need to work on and where is it that you can bring some skills to the table in order to improve your mission outcomes, your sort of consistency and viability of success in the future. So not only consider the short term, but let us know how we might be able to support your individual organizations moving forward, because that is what this portfolio is about.
So I just want to call out the agility of that right there. That I'm having a meta moment. Like, we didn't plan on giving you the survey for your teams. We didn't plan on handing out the deck. We actually decided not to do that. But here we are. We learned in the moment of like, wow, this would be really valuable. What if we did that? So I'm going to offer up what was a proprietary deck and allow you all to do whatever you want with it. And then the survey, if you run it with your teams, then it not only helps you all, but it helps Maria get a better understanding of how to serve you. So this is a meta moment of agility, right? We have a plan and we're iterating because of new information that's just come in. Thank you, Gregory. Thank you. Okay. So 1 or 2 more comments before we part ways today. Other things that you've noticed, or that as we just finish up, whether it's about the data, whether it's about the cases, whether it's just about how you're feeling at the end of this session, let's just take 3 more minutes and hear from you guys.
What I would share is that you know, from starting in management many years ago in the training, what I found, it's a journey, right? And Brian and I talked about this, I think last year at one of the IJIS meetings, right? This is so valuable to keep it top of mind, right? Like this sort of training. So I'd love to see other sessions and engage with you in other ways as well, right? So this was extremely valuable. Brought all these things back top of mind, like got me the juices going, thinking again. So great session.
Excellent.
You know,
Wonderful.
Greg, if I could just add to that, you know, we're as one of the opening slides suggested, we're in the middle of constant change. And really, if we're looking at where we are in sort of the history of organizational development, organizations, even society, I mean, we're at the preface of monumental change. And you know, our ability to continue to learn and adapt and implement really situates us as architects of our leadership journey, not only for ourselves, but our teams. And as you consider what was learned today, and as you consider moving forward, consider yourself as the creators, the architects of what could be a really phenomenal story for yourself, one that you might not see unfold depending on timing, but one that I think we should all be proud to play a role in. Gordon, do you have a moment or two? I'd love to talk a little bit about what you're up to, unless anyone has any closing comments.
Yeah.
Any other final comments?
Brian, Gordon, one last thing I'll add. I don't know if y'all have any case studies of it, but if you do have any of public sector entities, law enforcement agencies, anything that is on the public side, I think that would be extraordinarily helpful. If we don't have one, Maria, it might be something from IJIS that we look at doing a case study, find a really good, well-run public safety sector agency to do it. A lot of these sheriffs and chiefs that come in have never had any leadership training whatsoever in their life and have no idea how to lead an organization. So that might be something that we can look at from a case study if we don't have one.
I think that would be a great idea. Whether or not we have them, I think it's a good exercise for one of our members or several of our members to sort of get engaged in and give us fresh ones and new perspectives.
Well, and
I would love that.
Here's a shameless plug, Maria, but even the not so well-run ones, don't necessarily mean that the intent isn't there. They just might need some help. And certainly myself and Gordon would be very interested in assisting to create a case study if one doesn't already exist. So if your organization or one that you know is interested in embarking on guided change, I think it's a great opportunity for IJIS and all of us.
That would be great.
No, thank you. Give me your that was good, man. So much for that work.
I do want to just mention before we close, and maybe Maria can assist in this. You know, I've known Gordon forever. He's been a recent friend to IJIS as well. He is really dedicated and given his time and commitment to the organization, shared his resources, his knowledge and expertise. He's got a great new AI platform focused on better understanding leadership and allowing leaders to understand their own needs and challenges and teams. And so his company's name is Agency 150. And we had certainly been really, really excited for him to help lead today's conversation. But in exchange for that, I just did want to talk about a lot of the work that he's doing is helping organizations better understand themselves, better understand their needs, and designing solutions for that. So I really want to thank him from the bottom of my heart, and perhaps speaking on behalf of IJIS, for his generosity, both in time and in thought equity, for leading us through this and helping us shape today's program. So thanks, Gordon. You know, I'm forever in debt.
And since Brian has spoken from the bottom of his heart, or all of our hearts, I will reiterate that. I certainly am very grateful to you, Gordon. I would encourage everyone to visit the website and understand sort of the diversity of the services and your own Vita, because I think it plays in well to all of the skills that we've chatted about today and how that helps us shape our own futures. One of the greatest strengths, I think, of the IJIS community is because it comes from so many diverse backgrounds that on the rare occasion, or at least or more rare than I would like, on the rare occasion that we get together and have these conversations, it is thought-provoking. It does make you think. It does give you that burst of energy that we've chatted about. And I do believe that Gordon is one of the better examples of how the view into the outside world and into the multiple sectors that do touch our communities can truly be lessons learned to us. So I thank you for what you bring to the table. And I do hope that for all of the attendees today and the participants today, don't let this go too far off of your list. We will send you materials no later than the beginning of next week so that we can summarize a little bit of what this event provided and then be able to give you some of the slides so that you might be able to act within your organizations and move a couple of steps forward. I'll also ask you then to think of how else we might meet your needs. And to that one, I think we will bring this to a close. Alex, you're putting something up. There we go. And it speaks to the balance of our leadership portfolio. So we'll provide this to you as well within that package of information, and know that, as many of you may have heard in previous sessions, there really are several different services that we have available to you. And in being agile, we will adapt for your specific needs.
So just one last, if I could, just as long as shameless plugs are happening, I put a link in chat for a study that we're doing for global workplace. I just want to know how people are experiencing the gap in whether it's the technical future and AI driving it or just the changing workplace dynamics. We have an AI-driven study. So if you're interested in how an AI can be an interviewer, we've trained an AI to be a behavioral interviewer. That's my new company. It's a platform. So it's a research capability that you can use. It is a service that we're just launching now. So this is a public study that's open and available. So you can get a feel for what it's like being interviewed by an AI and how you might apply this in your own world. So whether you look at that or go to agency150.com or Legacy Work Advisors, that's how to reach out to me. It's been a pleasure to work with you all. And if you do want to chat about some of this content and how to think about it differently, or just get any leadership counsel, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Look me up, Gordon Rudo, and you'll see my study there as well. So hope to connect with you all in the future.